need to cover today is the outliner. So I'm going to just kind of highlight where that is. The outliner sits right up here in this top corner, and it is very similar to how we would think about the layer panel in either Photoshop or Illustrator. It's a little bit more similar to Illustrator than it is Photoshop, in that your collections are kind of the way that Illustrator, if you've ever used that application, can just kind of put everything inside a layer. So it could be text, it could be vector, it could be images. And this is similar. This can have images and different kinds of information. We'll say this is like a camera, this is our light. And when you collapse this, you actually get a little panel that shows you all of the things that are inside that that collection. So I can click on this and I can see all of my mesh, and then I can see all the lights that are in it or the camera that's in it. When I twirl it down, what's highlighted shows up here. Cool. A couple other things to think about with the collections that are similar to what we've been messing with in Photoshop. If I select something here in my outliner, I see it in my viewport, right? So there's a direct relationship. I can Shift+Click through items and select all of those things, and we can see that the one that's selected currently is amber. That's the active object, and then everything else that is selected is orange. And we can see how that works. If I wanted to switch which one was the active object, I can just press and hold Shift and select that object over here in the viewport, and then that turns into the active object. These are all still selected, but that's my active. And as you recall, if you've seen the other videos, that makes that's important when we start dealing with some of the pivots and the and then when we transfer materials and things like that. Whatever's amber is the active object. Whatever's orange is just also selected. Okie dokie. So some other things. I want to take the things that I don't want to be touched and put them into another collection. So let's talk about that. I want to take my light. I don't want to mess with that. And I want to Shift-Click on my camera. And I want to put these into a brand new collection. I can do that a couple different ways. There's a little icon right here that says make a new collection, but I'm going to show you the shortcut, which is M on your keyboard. And then it pulls up wherever your cursor is, as long as your cursor is in the viewport. What do you want to do? You can move this to existing collections, or you can make a new collection. And I'm going to say lights, camera, and for some reason I'm yelling, but we'll just leave it there. My caps lock was on. So as soon as I hit OK, you see that these both went into a brand new group, brand new collection. And I can now, if I wanted to, I could just pick it up and move it out, or I can move it back in over here. So that's one of the ways to make a new group. Up here, some of the things you can do with the collection, you can right-click on the word collection, and you can select all of the objects in that collection. Handy. You can delete the selection, or which would be, delete the collection, which would leave all of the groups of objects alone. Or you could delete the hierarchy, a very socialist creed, but also it allows you to delete all the objects that are inside the collection. Cool. Some other things that you can do, which are kind of interesting, is you can start to set up some filters. So right now we see this little object that has an eyeball in it. It's very similar to the other eyeballs in other applications. I can turn this on and turn this off. So I'm just hiding it from viewport. The shortcut for that is with any object is selected, you can just tap the H key and that will hide it. See how it's hidden? You can, with something that's hidden, you can pull it back by pressing Alt-H. This is similar to removing the transforms on an object. Remember, whenever we press Alt or Option on a Mac, and we then tap either R, we can get rid of rotations. Sorry, I'm just going to Command C that. We press and hold Alt or Option and tap G. That'll move it back to its starting point. And then if we tap S while holding Alt or Option, that'll change it back to its original scale. So I'm just going to set that back so that you can see that. Again, whenever you press Alt or Option, that undoes something. That's just kind of a standard thing to remember. But there are other filters that we can turn on. So if I look at this little button right up here, I can have the Don't Touch Me filter. So I can turn that on, and that's another little row. And I don't want my camera to move, right? I don't want to be able to touch that light. Right, so I can just turn these little arrows on, and when I try to select them, no joy. I can't do anything with them. I won't be able to do any kind of movement with that at all. And I think that's kind of important because sometimes you have something set, like a camera, a perspective, and you don't want to be able to have to move it, so that's kind of important. The last thing I'll do is I'm going to name an object. I'm going to click on my monkey here as a reminder to yourself, how do I zoom in on just this monkey? Have a think. There's two different ways that we've talked about. And we talked about one as a just kind of frame the selected method, and the other one as an isolation selection. Let's talk about both of those real fast. All right, if you thought that you would go up to View and Frame Selected, you are correct, right? That's one way to do it. If you thought the thing that we talked a little bit more about, which is / to isolate it, that's also correct, but notice the difference there. When I / it, everything goes away, and that's a toggle. When I go to View and Frame Selected, I'm just going to highlight this numpad period. So I've got a numpad on my keyboard. So I tap period, and it will bring Suzanne, the monkey, into full focus, but it will keep everything else there as well. And that's, depending on what you're doing, you want sometimes to see your item in context with everything else, and sometimes you just want it isolated. Anyway, that's a little bit of a distraction to the goal, which is we want to rename Suzanne. So I'm going to double click on the word Suzanne, and I'm going to call it Susie, and then hit enter, and now I've got Susie instead of Suzanne. So that's how you rename things. You can also rename collections. The one with Susie in it. And there you go. The last thing you can do, and this is a little above and beyond, but it's something I just recently learned, you can take your whole group, shift-click through it, and then you can go to Edit and Batch Rename. And so you can have everything be set to a brand new name. So I'm going to have it be new name objects, and then I want a suffix on the end, and we'll just do this little guy here. And what that will do is it will create a little underscore between each one of them. So I actually want to see individual objects, so I'm going to Command Z and undo that, but that's the last little bit of our outliner.